Okay, so today we uh, last part of the brisa was that also davar achar b'pnei davar ach. The Gemara explained is that they treated any child that was roy libya as a zav, and therefore no one would want to get near these children. And the reason why they did it is b'pnei davar achar because they were afraid of mishkav zav. At 9 years old, Hoyel V'Roy Labia, starting from the top of Daflam and Zayin Namar Aleph, Hoyel V'Roy Labia, Betame Nami Beziva, they will also automatically be Tame Tamasi. Amar Ravina, Zak Ravina, Hilkov. Therefore, we can say the same thing with a female goiter. Hati Noikis, Avoid Ivedis Kecham. A tonight girl who's also an otherwise known as Urala, Bas Gimel Shanim, if she's 3 years and 1 day old, meaning she's royal Labia, well, royal Labia, Mitamin Nami Beziva. She'll also be Tamin Beziva. Dr. Mark Pshita, what's the Chiddush of Arena? We already said, if the guy is royal Labia, they're Mitam al Zover Zova. Dr. Mark is a big Chiddush. Because Mount the Tema, Hayode Largule, you would have thought that a 9-year-old boy, is Roy Labia. Not only is he Roy Labia, but he's also someone who would try to entice and seduce somebody else. Therefore, we want Yiddish Kiddush to stay away from him. But a little girl who's only 3 years old, even though she's Roy Labia, but she's not going to be Margot somebody else. She's not going to try to seduce somebody else till she's 9. So you might have thought that she's only Metama Beziva once she's 9, but Mash Malon, that she's Metama Beziva the moment she's Roy Labia, which is 3 years old. Zok the Helig Gemara. Mistamech v'azor Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya Akasvei drops some loy shame. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya was leaning, as he was walking, he was leaning on the shoulder of Rabbi Samloi, his sham. Amalai, he told him, Samloi, you were not in attendance in the Besmedrash yesterday. When we were matir, the Shemin of a goy. Amar Loi. So Rabbi Samloi answered back, B'yameinu tater afes hapas. In our days, we should also be matir pas palter. Omar Lei. So Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya said, I can't do that. Im kain korulon beis shari. They'll call us a bezdin of Mekilim, a bezdin who only use matter things. I don't want to be known as that bezdin. Yitnan we learned, hey, Rabbi Yosef ben Yezer ish tzereda al ayel kamta. Ayel kamta, we're going to see in the Gemara, we're going to explain later, it's some type of shirts. Doche, that it's Torah, it's kosher. Al mashke beis mitva chaya, and the water and juices and different type of fluids that you'll find in the Beis Hamikdash, in the place where they butcher animals. Dochin, they're tar, and we'll see again in the Gemara in detail what this means. Val the yakir l'meisev, if somebody, the yakir l'meisev, if someone got near, that he touched the mace, misav is tummy. Why is that a chumrah? That the Gemara is going to explain as well. It sounds like it's a Pashat Halacha. Someone touched a mace, tummy. But Karelay, since Rabbi Yosef ben Yezer's trader was Mekel in these 3 cases, he was referred to as Yosef Sharia. Yosef would like to be matter things. Therefore, I don't want to be matter things. Amalei Reb Samloi told his Rebbe Yosi, Hasam Shara Tlas. There, Rabbi Yosef ben Yezer's trader was matter 3 things. You matter 3 things, they'll call you a person of Mekila. Umar Sharachada, you are only matter 1 thing, and that is the oil of a goy. Talk to Gemara, even if you're going to be matter the pass of a goy, Akati Tartnu Dahav, you only have 2 term. They won't let call you a peasant shori. Amalei, Ana Shiroi Achriti. I happen to have been matter an additional thing. So if a matter pass and a matter shemen with the other thing, with the 3rd thing, it'll be 3, and weiter I'm going to be known as a bezin shari. Mahi, what was the 3rd thing that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said it was matter? It's not we learned. Zekitech. Someone gave his wife a get and said, Zekitech, this is your get. Im loy bosi mikan at shnei mosachodesh. If I didn't come between now and 12 months, umeis b'soich shnei mosachodesh, and the husband dies within those 12 months. And now the question is she considered an almana, and she's zakuk liyibam if she didn't have children, and her husband had a brother, or if she's called a grusha, and therefore she's not a zakuk liyibam. So what he paskin over there? Ain't a get. It's not a get. That's what the the Mishnah paskins. Tani Allah, and we learned on that. Rabbi Seinu he tiru ali nasi. The Rabbonim were matir to get married, meaning they considered her a gerusha, that she's not zakuk liyibam. Barmina man Rabbi Seinu. Who is Rabbi Seinu? Who is this anonymous Rabbi Seinu? On Rabbi Shmuel, it's Bezdina the Shari Mosh. It's the same Bezdin that was Matir oil, which we know is Rabbi Danasi. So you see, not only is Rabbi Danasi the Matir oil, he was also Matir, a lady, in this case, where her husband says Sagita. And if he would then be Matir a third thing, which would be Paspalter, they would call him a Bezdin Shari. Zok Gemara, what is this shita that is makel on the Gabi Sagita? What are the details of what's going on over here? What are the mechanics of what's happening here? Zok Gemara, Sarvi look Rabbi Yoisi. He holds like Rabbi Yoisi, the Omar. Rabbi Yoisi said, Zmanoi shel star, moichiach alav. The date of the star is moichiach. Meaning, even though you don't say me'achshav, I want to be chalam afreya, the fact that you put a date on the star proves that you want it to be chalam afreya based on the date of the star. Because if you only wanted it to be chal later, then you didn't need a date on the star. The date of the star is trying to show that I want to be chal now from the day that the star is dated. The Amar Abba, Rabbi Yehuda Anosi, Rabbi Yehuda Anosi was the one who was mekel and said this is a I could get. Call Sharte all his life they were never moited to him. Barbila, those who are goyers, call Yosy. All of his associates never ever accepted that psak. Amalei Rabbi Lahusab. Rabbi said to this elderly Kisharisua. So what do we have over here? If someone said, I'm giving you this get, may achshav, if I die, or I'm giving you a get, al menas, that I die, that clearly is saying that I want to get to be chal now. But the lotion that we're discussing is a little bit vague. It's zegitech im leibasi bikana bat shemas achodesh. And we don't know, does this mean me'achshav, or does this mean at the time of 12 months? So here you have Yehuda Nosi who's mekel, and he says vibaltes asman on this get that sedem leibasi bikana shemas achodesh. The date indicates that I wanted to be chal now l'mafreya. So zog tigemara. Now we have a shayla. So you're matir. You consider her a grusha. But at what point would you be matir? The moment he dies, even though 12 months have not yet passed, are we going to be matir? Because we know that it's chalam afreya, and we know he's never coming because he died. Or maybe you have to wait till the tonight actually triggered the Ikaim tonight. You have to wait the actual 12 months. Frank Gemara, why are you clearing this Shaila in this case where it's under dispute if it's considered Me'achshav, and it's Rabbi Yehuda Nosi who says that since there's a date on the start considered Me'achshav, why don't we have the same Shaila in the case where you said Me'achshav and it's clear cut according to everybody? And he died within those 12 months. Have a get, that's a good get. The Hakayim late tonight, it's merely a tonight, and that everybody agrees because it says Me'achshav. There we should have asked this Shaila. But is it a get as soon as he dies? Because once he dies, even though the 12 months have not elapsed, but he's not coming anymore. Or maybe you have to wait till you know that tonight will be with him. Avoda, this Shaila that we asked whether or not you have to wait for the full 12 months to elapse, that Shaila could have been asked on the Mishnah itself. So why did Rabbi Elazar ask Rabbi asked Lahu Sabo? Why did he only ask it? So Klimar El Mishum the Havish Bahuminyana. Since he was there when they had that discussion of Rabbi Nasi of if Zman and the Shtar is considered Mayachshav, so he wanted to know what was concluded over there. But Avoda, it would have the same halacha by a case of Mayachshav. El Mishum the Havish Bahuminyana. Amar Bai. Akol Moedim. Everybody's Moedim that if the following Tanai was made, let's say the Tanai was, you should be Mugareshas when when the sun rises, when the sun comes out of its sheath. So clearly that means the get's not going to be chal till morning at sunrise, which means if the husband dies overnight, she's considered an almana and not a grusha. Therefore, if he dies at night, the get's not chal yet. It's not chal till the morning. Get lachamiso. It would be a get lachamiso, meaning she's on a geresha, she's an almana, and she would follow him. But if she said, if he said, almanas shetetzei chava minatika, not that the get should be chal when the sun rises, rather the get should be chal now, almanas that later the sun will rise, then may achshav kamer. That's considered me'achshav, and therefore v'chimayis b'leilya ha vadai tana hava to get mechayim. So if he dies in the middle of the night, the daytime will still come, the sun will eventually rise, and that makes it that the get was chalim afre. To get mechayim kid Rafuna, like Rafuna taught us, the Omer Rafuna koloimer almanas ka'omer me'achshav. If someone says, I'm giving you a get almanas something, it's as if you said me'achshav, because it's merely a t'nai, but the nesinas I get is right now when you're giving it. The only discussion that we have, ela be'im teitzei. If he said im teitzei chama min artika, that's where you have the shaila. If he said im teitzei, but there is a date on the get, then if you don't know Yoisi, the fact is the date on the star is an indication that the person wanted to be chal based on the day that the star was dated. Because if he only wanted to be chal when the sun rise, well, then he didn't have to put a date on the star. The date is indicating that this is when the husband wanted to be chal, and it's just like Kimei Hayom and Macy or Kimei Achshav and Macy. Rabbanon, less to Rabbi Yosi, they don't know like Rabbi Yosi, they don't Zman shall get it's not a raya, and therefore it's not like it's he said Me'achshav. Ba'avalek is Agidech Imesi Greda, like a regular case of race, Agidech Imesi, where the get is not chal if he dies before the time. Lufa, let's drill down into this halach. Hey, Rabbi Yosi ben Yezer straight up, al ayel kamtza, dachi, that an ayel kamtza is kosher. Mashka base mitbachaya, and the mashkin that are found in the butchery area of the base of Mikdash, dachin that it's tahar. Val the Yaakov lemesa misaf, and somebody who touched a mace is tamei. The Karele Yosef Sharia, and they called him Yosef Sharia because he was matir three things. Break the more. Let's see what these things that he was matir are. My ayel kamsa. What is this ayel kamsa? What type of sheretz? What type of insect is it? Rav Amar Shushiva. It's an insect called a Shushiva. Rav Chia bar Ami Mishmei Deula Amar. It's an insect called a susbil. What's the difference? Rav Amar Shushiva. Now Rashi tells us that a Shushiva is a type of bug that does not have. It does have. It has a long neck. Rashi says it's a min chava v'roishay orach. It has a long head. Now all of the examples of the shrotzim that are usher, the Torah gives four examples that are usher: arba, solom, kagel, and chagel, and all of those have short heads. So this shushiva is not similar to those. So this is what we have over here. Since the head of this insect is longer than the head of the four insects that the Torah specific that are tamei that you're not allowed to eat, Mar Savar, Roishay Aruch Usser, Roishay Aruch is Usser, Umar Savar Roishay Aruch Mutter. Why should it make a difference? So Rashi says very simple. If you hold that there's a Kalalu Prat and Ein Bichlal Elamasha Prat, then you're going to say Dafka, these four are going to be Tomei and Osir, and one that is not going to be. And therefore, the insects with a long neck that are not Arba Shalom Chagel and Chagav are going to be more. But on the other hand, if you hold that it's a klal prat to klal, if you've done it with a klal prat to klal, then you're marba kol prat. So you would even be marba an insect with a long head because there's other similarities. They have atzara shavu shabed. What do these four minim have in common? Yeshlam dalad raglaim. They have four legs. Dal confine, four wings. The yeshlam karsulim, it has knees. And its wings cover most of its body. Is going to be awesome. So that is the machlokes if the discussion is about shushiva. However, the discussion is about a suspil. Let's turn over the Omid. The Daf Lamed Zayin note base. Suzbil and Birai Shayar, Lagabe, the question of an insect with a long head. Everybody holds that will still be considered in the group of insects. We're talking about an insect with a different feature. The Chnav of Chayfinus Rubai Aidet Kakamim. We said that one of the insects that's Tomei is if its wings cover most of its body. Well, what if you have an insect whose wings does cover most of its body, but not very easily visible? If you measure with a micrometer, you'll see it's just as long as it's rife, even if it's barely rife, it's good enough to say that it's connected to that category of insects that are usher. The minkar be'inon, in order for it to be considered wings that cover the row of their body, it has to be obvious just by looking at it without measuring it with fine instruments. Therefore, this where we learned that Yoisi, when Yosi Shreda was makel by insects to make. Now let's look at the next. Mekel the almashke, the mashke in the butchering area of the Beis Hamikdash, dochin to their talk. My dochin, what does it mean it's talk? Rav Omer dochin mamish. It's in Ganzatar, meaning it's the whole concept of mashkin become tome. Really, mashkin with their rights doesn't become tome. The whole concept that it becomes tome is only a derbanon, and they weren't geyser in the Beis Hamikdash. It would have been too difficult. Shmuel Amar dochin milatamach. Thomas Atun Yeshbe. Midaraisa mashkin become tame, they just don't transmit to. Therefore, the Rabbanon is only that they transmit tame, regular mashkin. That was relaxed in the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, in the Beis Hamikdash, the mashkin became tame, but it wouldn't transmit to. Zog to Gemara. Thomas Atun Yesh. Go ahead. Rav Amar Dochin Mamish. Teskasaver Thomas Mashkin the Rabbanon. He holds the whole tumah b'chlal that mashkin can become tumah by chulin is only midrabanan. The chigazer rabbanan tumah b'mashkin da'alma. They were only geyser tumah by regular mashkin. Alva b'mashkin be'mitbachaya, but the mashkin in the Beis Hamikdash loy geyser rabbanan. So therefore, there's no tumah at all on any mashkin in the Beis Mitbachaya. Shmuel Amar Dochin milatam acher, aval tumas atun yesh. Even they still become the mash, but they won't be with time anything else. Why? He also mashkin is daraisa, and therefore the tamachim is the rabbanon. The whole because of the rabbanon that the bezin has the chazal have a right to relax is only that it can be mitam something else. He goes rabbanon b'mashkin to alma b'mashkin be'mit b'chaya like goes. Here again, Rabbi Yosi ben Yezer straight the paskin that it's not Tomei, Mashkin is Mekel. That's why he was called a Sharia, someone who was matter things. And the third thing was, while the Yikrav Lamesa Misov, if somebody gets close to a mace, if someone touches a mace, he becomes Tomei. The correlate, because of these three foolish, the correlate Yosef Sharia. Called him Yosef the Matir. Frank the Gemara, Yosef asked me about it. He said if you touch a mace, you become Tomei. So why would we call him Yosef the Matir? It's Yosef the Aser. Behind, I got another problem. The Yoisi. Not a drabana. You become Tomei when you touch a mace. It's a force person. The Chsiva Chalasha, you got Pneas, or the Chalacher. I be mace. He's Tomei Shivas Yomim. So true. The Yoisi, the Akriv Tomei. The person who touches the actual mace is Tomei. But now you have a Tomei mace. The Yakriv be the Yakriv. What if you touch somebody who touched the mace? Or you're taka Tomei, but you're only Tomei out of Erev. You're not Tomei 7 days. Also, Mazal came in with Geyser. The Geyser afilu the Yakriv be the Yakriv. Even if you touch somebody who touched the mace, you're also Tomei 7 days. Also, and they came along, Vukma de Raisa, and they were makel to say that you go back to the halachas the Raisa, that only if you touch a mace are you Tomei Shivas Yomim, but if you touch somebody who touched a mace, only Tomei for 1 day. Frank Gemara, how could you say that? The Yaakov, Nami Deraisu. Someone who touches a person who's a Tomei mace, it's also Midaraisa Pasuk that you're Tomei 7 days. The Chsiva Chalashiyiga, Boy Hatame Yitma. So the Chalashiyiga Boy Hatame Yitma, whoever touches the Tomei will also be Tomei. So it's a Deraisa that if you touch somebody who touched a mace, then you're Tomei Shivas Yom. Amur Rabban Kamei the Rabba Mishmei the Mar Sutra, or Ray Rav Nachman. The Amr Mishmei Rav Nachman. The Deraisa the Yaakov Bechipurin Tumashiva. If you touch somebody who not that he touched a mace, who's now touching a mace. So Reuven is touching a mace, and Shimon comes along and touches Reuven while Reuven is still in contact with the mace. That's where there's a deraisa, that Tumas Shiva, that the person who touches the Tomei 7 days. What if Reuven touched a mace? He became Tomei, and now he's not touching a mace anymore. And now Shimon touches it. That means the rice is only Tumas Erev. He's only Tumas for a day. But also, the Xer was the Gozer. Afilu Shaloi Bechiburin. If you touch somebody who's a Tomei mess, there's a Xer that it should be Tumas Shiva. But also, a day came along. Feko Vukma Deraisa. Frank tomorrow. Deraisa Mai. What is the Tumah Deraisa? So that's someone who touches the mace. That's referring to the person who touched the other person, and the other person is touching the mace, called Bechiburin. That's also Tomei 7 days. That's when Reuven touched Shimon, and Shimon was Tomei mace, but he wasn't actually touching the mace at the time, so Reuven touched him. Okay, so one pasuk is speaking, the pasuk that says Yitma Shivas Yomim is speaking when Reuben touched Shimon while Shimon was actually touching the mace. The pasuk that says Yitma Da'arav is when Reuben touched Shimon, but Shimon is no longer touching the mace. So therefore he's only Tomei at Har. So to Gemara, Amalu Rava. Rava told him, Lava Mina Lachu, didn't I tell you, like Titlube Buki Sariki B'Rav Nachman? Don't blame your nonsense on Rav Nachman. Rashi touches Buki Sriki as follows. Let's take a peek into Rashi. Buki Sriki Kadam Rekim, your empty jugs. Why are you saying shot in this kula is that it's the discussion of whether or not if you touch a person who's Tomei, if you're Tomei Shivas Yom or not? That's not Pshat. I'm going to tell you Pshat. The Shiloh over here was, Hach Yom Rav Nachman. You know what Rav Nachman said that the suffix was over here? About suffix Rabbim Hitlerland. He was mad at suffix Tamar B'Shus. What if you're in a Rishus HaYachid and you're not sure if I share it to touch this food, and therefore you're not sure if it's tamei or not. If the suffix occurred in Rosh Hashanah, it's vaday tamei, which we'll soon see we learn from Saita. But if the suffix occurred in Rosh Hashanah, it's vaday tahor. So Zog to Gemara, that was the discussion here. Suffix timur Rosh Hashanah that it's tahor. Frank Gemara, how could that be a takana? We are hilchos sami Saita garmin law. It's Allah Moshe Sinai that we learn out of Saita. The Tzavik Tamar B'Shus HaYachid is Sveikei Tamei. The Tzavik Tamar B'Shus HaRabim is Sveikei Tor. Ma Saita B'Shus HaYachid. Af Tumar is B'Shus HaYachid. Allah Chavein Meir Kei. So we have a limud from Saita. The Tzavik Tamar B'Shus HaRabim is Sveikei Tor. Vein Meir Kei. But you don't paskin like that for Rabim. You know why? Because it's also Zuzule Bay. The people will be Mizal Tuma. But the EU, the Irile Iruye. And what he did was he paskined, even though Rabbi Yochanan said Allah Mayin, he came along and paskined that it's Feikoi Tar. Zok to more right. What he did was he actually create a border between Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah. In other words, anything in Rosh Hashanah is tahor. He also looked at Rabbi Yanai when it came to Rabbi Yanai with a shaila about a case of Savik Tuma Rishus Rabbi. So someone Savik the Savik Tuma Rishus Rabbi. You know what he said? He said Hamaya Bishikasa. The Nahara, there's water here in the depth of the river. We know, so drop the guitar. Mishnah says shalakoi things of great is also to eat. Not also but no, but also to eat. You know how do we know this? Says the pasuk, we want to go through your land, but you'll sell me food, mine you'll pay for it, so we learned the pasuk is clearly saying that we're buying food. So come on, anything that you're allowed to buy from it has to be like water. Just like water. When you buy water, it hasn't changed. So we don't have to worry about anything that's wrong with it. The only type of food that you can buy from a goy is if it's loydishtana. You can buy a cut apple from the tree. It wasn't cooked, it wasn't modified. There you can buy it. So you're telling me, are you telling me that you're not allowed to buy roasted wheat kernels from a goy? And you can tell me, yes, you're talking not allowed to. But Tanya, we have a bride that says chitin, v'asan kloyos, mutar. So that can be what's also ela kimayim. Rather, let's make a different comparison to mayim. Mamayim shaloi nishtanim mibriyosan. Just like water, it's in its original form. Av oichol shaloi nishtanim mibriyosoi, and it wasn't ground. But Avoda, if it's roasted, it's not called nishtanim mibriyosoi. So Gemara l'mayata chitin v'tachnon hachanami da'asurin. You're telling me if the goy ground and milled the chitin into flour, you're not allowed to buy it from a goy? You're allowed to buy flour from a goy. Ella otherwise. Or just like mayim that you buy from a goy didn't change through fire. So too, you know what's also what's mutter to buy from a guy? Food that was not changed in its form because it was cooked. It's raw. That you're allowed to buy from a guy, but you're not allowed to buy from a guy cooked items, which is shlokim of permission. So we have a very interesting Tosfos. Vashlaka is the bottom Tosfos on Lamed Zayin of base. Vashlaka is minat namili. Aimer Rabbeinu Tam. The Midaboy Talmud of Shlokas. Since the Gemara wants to know how do you know Shlokas is also, and the Gemara brought a psukim for it because Sovereign Midaraisa who, and it seems to say that it's Deraisa Shema Gezerah Kadmoidisi. Maybe it's an earlier Gezerah. Because if we're bringing a Rafa Pasuk, that means this Gezerah might have been a Gezerah back from the Torah's days already. And maybe this Gezerah is back from the Torah days, and that's why they said we'll buy food from you, only food that's not modified. Because there was a Gezerah already. It came long before the Torah was given. And the Gezerah of Shlokos wasn't made at the same time that Chazal Asrit Paspalter. Rather, the Gezerah happened way before. Ushlokos, what are Shlokos? Haktoisvis, he in Yone Tavshel. It's cooked items. Kidemasha Bachshmaita, like it's here. Umutchilu Gozer Allah. You know why they were Gozer on it way back when? Bitam Chasnas. Because we don't want you eating and dining with Goyim. So we don't let you eat their cooked foods. The reason why at that time, way back when they were Gozer on Shlokos, they weren't Gozer on Paspalter, really, there's not such a chash of chasnas. So much later, thousands of years later, Shammai and Hillel came. The Gozu b'yud chestavarim gam malapas. Their exeris of 18 things that they prohibited. That's when they added the prohibition to buy paspalter. How could I tell you that the takana of shlokes is an old zera? In the Mishnah, pas is listed before shlokes. Wouldn't that indicate that the takana of pas came before the takana of shlokes? The Taisus no. The Kamagam Shlokos Zera Kadmoinis Yoisi. It was a much more ancient Zera. Ucheshetirus a past, and even when the later generations, Rabbi Danosi was Matir Paspalter, Loyi Tiru Shlokos, they were never Matir the old Zera of Shlokos. Time of Shlokos Trey Milin. There are two separate takanos. Pas is a recent takana that they were Mekalan. Shlokos was a much more ancient takana, and it was never a kula. For takamakbara mishlak. Who may be right, he brought a right with the reading period base the Beitza, Velezer Eimer, ein Oifen Ella ala Ofoi, and Mivashin Ella Mavush. When you're making an erev tavshilin, you're not allowed to bake unless you created for your erev something baked. And you're not allowed to cook with your erev tavshilin unless you made for your erev something that was mavush. Shenemar esasher toifu eifu, vesasher tavashlu bashelu. Only bake what you have a sample of. Only cook what you have a sample.
So what's that, Yosy? What you're saying is that
what's that?
If I baked, I can't cook, and if I cook, I can't bake.
Well, that's why by our erev tavshilin, we have a tavshil, which is an egg, and a matzah, which is baked, which will allow us to bake and cook using the erev tavshilin. But otherwise, we have a shita here that holds that you could only bake with an erev tavshilin if there's a baked good in it, and you can only cook with the erev tavshilin if there's a cooked good in it.
Yeah, so if I took a bag of potato chips and a Coke to make an erev,
what's that?
If I took a bag of chips and a can of Coke to make an erev,
that would not, according to the shita, that would not allow you to bake.
Right. Maybe fry. Okay. It has to be specific. You have to make
that's what it says over here. Yeah. Yep. So let's finish Tosis. We'll see how we fare out. The Re says the Beru of Tavshilin Sogi Bechad Oy Bepas Oy Betavshil. The Reals no. Anything you use for an erev tavshilin will be enough to be matter everything, side baking and side cooking. But less hilchasa kahider of Elazar. We don't pass them like that Gemara we just quoted from Elazar that only allows you to do on Yom Tov with the erev tavshilin what you prepared. The Shamutiu, Rabbi Elazar Zecher. The Gam Hoylech Beshitas Chananya Aliba de Beishamai, that's working with Chananya Shita, which follows Beishamai. The boy pass Vitavshel Vichamet Tamunim. But it was still Matir. Uvi Yishalmi the Beitza, and Yerushalmi and Beitza, Holag Rabbi Yeshua Behedjale, Rabbi Yeshua argues on him, on Rabbi Lezer. This is what Yerushalmi says, as Toifu Efu, Tabashlu Bashelu, Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, Oifin Allah Ofi Mavashlan Mavushlan. But Rabbi Yeshua argues, Rabbi Yeshua Aimer, Oifin Umavashlan, Alamush. Varmina Bishal Seifrim, Halach Achar Mekel, since Erev Tavshilin is the Rabbanon, you go bust in a Mekel by the Rabbanon, and Avoda, with either one of them, you could do both. With a Tavshil, you could bake, and with a baked good, you could cook. Rabbi Shua Mekel, Rabbi Shua's Mekel, and that's who we pass like by the Rabbanon. But oid, the Talmud Shalonu in our Talmud Bavli, Chananya, Aliva de Beisilel, Loi Matzchu Elochad. Chananya, according to Beisilel, holds that you only need one min for the Erev Tashilin. Umio Elam Noagu, La'arev Bepas Vitaf. So the minig is to take bread and egg, Hoil V'yota Davar Mipi Alachas Gedoylois for Rabbeinu Tam. Since the Bahag and Rabbeinu Tam said that you should use both for the Erev, the minig has proliferated that the way most people make an Erev is with a matzah and a tafel. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to finish Daf Lamed Zayin. Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we're going to learn Daf Lamed Ches on Shabbos.
Yes, we up to. I can see your seatbelt.
What's that?
I can see your seatbelt.
Yeah, I'm traveling safely.
Shkoyach Mazel Tov.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your message. At first, I didn't chop what you meant by Yavomis, but then it clicked. I was slow for a second. With all the relation.
I'm glad, Dave, to see you think differently to me. You thought about Yavomis and that maybe the families are already married and integrated. I thought, how was he Mekadisher? With what kind of value?
Well, when we were thinking, I was telling my son, I learned to the Gemara that you could be Mekadosh with Perish. So I said, why should I go buy a ring? You could be Mekadosh with Perish. You know, as long as it's not Shalavai Dezorah, if it's from an Aveli, even you can be Mekadosh with it. That didn't go over too well.
Okay, it's Rabba.
Thank you.
Travel
I'm sure they also learned Gemara, and she says she cannot be